Metrics, what are they and what are they useful for? Well, this tutorial looks at the old adage, you cannot manage what you do not measure. But it also focuses in on the whole idea of it's not about measuring everything, it's about knowing what's important to measure. So we're going to have a look at what the most important metrics to have a look at, and that will help us to figure out the different flags when we're looking at measurement and when we're looking at improvement and optimization of what we're doing within a digital environment. I'm going to start off with a couple of quotes here. Most marketers don't need more information, they need the right information. It's as simple as that. So when it comes down to your aims and objectives, the very first thing that we look at when we're looking at a digital marketing campaign are your aims and objectives of that particular campaign. So with that in mind, they are telling us what our final destination is. But what metrics will do, they will tell us how close we are to that, if we're on the right track, if we're going off track, what we can do to improve it and how quickly we can get there. So it'll tell us a lot of the kind of, the checkpoints that we need to get through in order to achieve our goals. What I have here now is a host of different quotes around this area here, and all of them are really useful and relevant, okay? Errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all. Now, that's a very valid point. We could all argue about, the way we measure things and how we're measuring different metrics, but the most important thing is figuring out what you need to measure and then figuring out what the best way to do it is, and then to be consistent in what we're doing it, to figure out how well we're moving along and achieving what our goals are. The one here in the bottom left hand corner, what gets measured gets managed. So the whole idea of this is that if you're measuring it, you're actually thinking about trying to achieve a certain goal. And if you're not measuring it and if you're not managing it, well, you're not achieving it. So all of these points here, we could go into all of these little references and all these little quotes, and we could dive into them. But all of them have got to do with metrics and the importance of it. One of my favorite ones here, Albert Einstein came up with, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Another way of looking at that, if you can't explain your idea or your theory to a 5-year-old, well, then you don't understand your theory in the first place. The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. Right. So it's about trying to find out what we need to know and how that will indicate what we do next. Okay. So let's be honest, with everything we measure, the measurement is only part of it. If we don't use that measurement and if we don't apply it to our theory, well, we're at nothing. So with regards to this, it's about what we do next. And the data should help us make that decision on what we do next and how we get there. So what I'm going to talk about next is what to measure. So for starters, when you talk about websites, when you talk about, social media, when you look at digital in general, reach is really important. So how many of your audience are you reaching? Who are they? What do we know about them? All of these things, okay? So reach is a measure of the site's overall ability to attract an audience, or a social media channel's overall ability to attract an audience. So how well are you doing it, okay? And the reach is just the entry point of our measurement. After that, we've got to start thinking about, the different aspects associated with reach. All visitors should not be valued equally. Somebody might come once to our site or to our social media channel, and they might unsubscribe and never come back again. Now, that doesn't make them useless. It just makes them a stat, okay? Somebody else might come every single day for years, all right? And then others might come onto your site or onto your social media channel, and every time they come on there, they might convert, they might buy something from you, might sign up to something, they might download something. All those three examples of the visitors are very, very different. So it's up to us to figure out who are our loyal customers, who are our fly-by customers, who are, frequent customers, and at what position they are in the product life cycle. So in other words, at what position, when are the trigger points to when we influence them to do certain things? It's about understanding our customers as much as possible. And that's why I mentioned earlier on that counting visitors, counting users has to be consistent. So if you do this on a longitudinal basis, you will get, you'll get to understand your audience in a lot better ways. Reach doesn't tell us really much about our audience. It just tells us how many there are. Okay. Now let's be honest, the higher the number, the better. But it doesn't tell us whether they are our preferred target audience or who they are. Okay. The next thing we're going to look at is the overall conversion rate. Now, this is the people coming onto your social media channel or onto your site up here. This is the reach and the number of people buying from you or converting at the end. Okay. When we talk about conversion, quite often we're talking about sales, but not always. We could be talking about somebody signing up to a newsletter. We could be talking about somebody downloading or viewing a certain page or whatever. So whatever our goal is, that's what conversion is all about. Now, because we're talking about a sales funnel here, we obviously mean that there's a lot more people reached than there are people converted. Okay, so just say 100 people come to our site. Well, then our reach is 100. Okay, and quite often when it comes to conversion, it's a lot less than that. So if somebody buys from you, the looker to booker ratio, for instance, could be a lot less than that. So if you look at, for instance, travel in the middle of this, you can see 2.1%. So that means for every 100 people that come to your site, 2.1 of them will buy from you. It also means that 7.9% of them will not buy from you, or 98% of them will not buy from you. So what that means is 98% of the people coming to your site, you lose them along the buying process. This could be something simple as somebody landing on your site and leaving straight away. Okay. This is called the bounce rate. So the people landing on your site and leaving straight away without doing anything else. Or it could be somebody going all the way through the process, and then when they get to the actual checkout, they abandon their shopping cart, which is a very common, happening. So with these kind of things, we can track where exactly they are on the conversion funnel or the sales funnel. Okay, and you can see different areas such as catalogs, such as Amazon, a lot higher than maybe electronics, which is 1.1%. Home and furnishing 2%, travel, as I said, 2.1%, apparel 2.2%, and so on. So, the catalogs are things like Argos and Amazon and so on, where people actually go normally with an intention of buying at some stage, either very soon or somewhere down along the route. So, conversion rate, I've normally described the conversion rate as a bit like taking your temperature when you're sick. Tells you there's something wrong, but doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong and how to fix it. Okay, so what that means is somebody's temperature when they're sick will tell them the temperature's higher than normal. Okay, and it will tell you there may be an infection. It doesn't tell you whether there's an infection in their toe or an infection in their ear or an infection in their nose or where. Okay, so that it's an indicator. It's a red flag. So while we know that there's a problem, we don't know where the problem is. That's where the other metrics come into play. What we're going to talk about is we're going to have a look at conversion, and we're going to see the different elements that come together to form conversion. Now, it says here it's all about conversion. Conversion is simply getting your visitors to do what you want them to do. It sounds easy, but this is the holy grail. Okay, if we got everyone to do what we want them to do, we'd have 100% conversion rate, but that's not probable or practical. Okay. So really what we're talking about is trying to lessen the drop off here between the reach and the conversion at the end. Okay. And as we can see here, the overall conversion rate is, the number of people who drop off from landing on the site right through to achieving your aims. So I think that's fairly straightforward. What we have to remember is websites, people make up their mind about websites very, very quickly. Websites judged in the blink. So 1/20th of a second, 1/20th of a second, the blink of an eye, people make up their mind about your website. Some people will look at your website and leave straight away. As I said earlier on, that's your bounce rate. We don't want that to be too high. And if that is very high, well, then we have a problem with our marketing and how people get there, or with our website itself, or with our message being delivered on the website, or the design or the color or whatever. Okay, so we've got to figure out what the problem is with that. Now here's a very simple little strategy. If we strengthen our homepage so we lose fewer people at the top, everything else being equal, that means you will automatically have more coming out of the bottom. Okay, so your bounce rate, you don't want that to be, you want it to be 0 if possible, but you don't want it to be too high. Okay. Once we've actually talked about getting people onto our site, the next area we talk about is acquisition, which means that you're actually engaging your customer, that they're there, that they have a look at your homepage, that they move around your site. Let me just rephrase, not every person coming onto your site will come through your homepage. Your reach may not just be your homepage, it may be any particular page in which there's a link coming into. So the goal is that visitors participate, that they come into your realm of influence, and that they get influenced by you, and hopefully move on from just being engaged on the site, but move on to the next stage of the buying process, and hopefully buy from you and move on. Okay, so that's conversion. Okay, conversion is simply getting your visitors to do what you want them to do, such as to buy from you, or register from you, or download from you, or whatever your goal is. Okay, now what's very interesting about this in the sales funnel is it's really only halfway down along the actual funnel. Okay, so getting them to buy from you is not the end goal. So what is? Okay, retention, retaining your customer. Okay, so once they've bought from you, retention is trying to get them to come back and buy from you again. Okay, and that kind of borders on the whole idea of the next stage, which is looking at loyalty. So it gives your customer a higher lifetime value to your business. This is very, very important. As well as that, just talking about retention, it's easier to retain a customer than to acquire a new one. So retention down here is cheaper than acquisition up here. So once you've got them buying from you, it's really important that your customer service and your follow-up is really good, and that you offer them products at the right time. So, because I'm going to talk about something here called the 80-20 rule, which means that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. So once you actually get them to buy from you, well, then it's cheaper to go and try and get these same people to buy from you again and again and again. Okay, so that's the assumption there. And then loyalty. The arrow's going to the wrong place, but loyalty here. Okay, loyal customers are customers that buy from you often and keep coming back. And a real loyal customer, in the case of somebody like Apple, will be the ones that readily are looking for new products and new things from this brand or from this business. Okay, and they go to you. So that's a real live customer, a real loyal customer, I should say. So it's really about trying to keep them buying from you. On average, only 35% of buyers make a second purchase at the site they buy from initially. Really important that we try and move this along. Okay, on average, the heaviest 20% of monthly visitors account for 64% of all the page impressions. So again, that's looking at loyal customers again. Okay, so the overall abandonment rate is the number of people who commence but do not complete the buying process. So if we talk about, on average in travel, it's 2.1% conversion rate. Well, then the average abandonment rate is 97.9%. Okay, so 98% really. Okay, so how can we influence this? Well, this is what we're talking about, metrics. It's about understanding what are the key points. How can I understand where somebody is in the process? How can I influence them to move on to the next process, or encourage them to move on to the next part of the process? The answer is to track them, to measure what they're doing, and to manage what they're doing. So it's very important that we keep an eye on this. Quite often we see now that if we abandon a shopping cart, and especially if we're registered on a site, we might get an email a little bit later down the line saying, well, pretty soon after that, saying, have you forgotten something? You've still got things in your shopping cart, okay? And sometimes they might even offer you a little incentive, like, a percentage off or something like that. And this is to try and get you back into the process of buying from them and encourage you to kind of like, in their case, upselling a little bit and whatever, okay? So really important. So abandonment is people who, before they buy from you, jump ship, okay? So prospective customers demonstrate their lack of enthusiasm through abandonment. They leave the website, okay? We can measure the people who have left and come back again. So it's really important to see whether the same person's coming back over and over again, because the rule of thumb here is that a person quite often needs to visit a new site 5 times before they feel comfortable with and move on. I don't know if that's completely right, but if we keep that as a rule of thumb, that means we've got to encourage them back. We've got to encourage them and keep, keeping our product in their mind. Okay, so it's all about brand awareness and so on. Attrition are the people who have bought from us but who are no longer doing business with us. Okay, so again, we need to measure that. We need to figure out what are the signs of attrition. And the signs of attrition are people who have bought from us before but unsubscribe or unregister. You'd say, well, why is that? I want to know why they're doing these things. And if you know why they're doing these things, well, then maybe you can do something about it. Okay. Then we have churn. Churn measures how much of your customer base you are losing in a given period of time. So in other words, you're not retaining your customers. Why is that? So if we're measuring all of these things, we start to see a very clear picture of what's happening on our site or through our social media channel. And what's really important is, and I mentioned this right up at the top, is a goal should focus on these components. And what I'm going to say about metrics, it's not just about listening. It's about listening and understanding and learning from what you're hearing. Okay, so it's about, as I keep saying, what you do next. Okay, so with this in mind, there's lots of different channels out there that will help us to measure different things. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce some of these. It's worth your while going into all of these. Now, Google Analytics, the first one I'm just going to talk briefly about. Google Analytics is an amazing piece of software that you get a little bit of code and you put it into your website. It will measure who's coming to your site, how often, where they're coming from, what they're doing, what kind of browsers they're using, what kind of software, what kind of hardware, their level of engagement, what behavior they're doing, their demographics, all of these things, okay? And you can learn an awful lot by looking at this. So Google Analytics will work with, with websites, but they'll also work with apps as well, and other little things like that, okay? So, Google AdWords, what you can do with a Google AdWord is you can actually get, believe it or not, a little snippet here, and you can put it into your website. So you can see how many people are coming from the Google ad that campaign that you've got and going to your website. Okay, so you can see the conversion rate or the click-through rate that you've got there. So you can see how well your actual ad is working for you. And you can tweak things and improve them based on these as well. So there's lots of really, really useful things in there. When you're looking at Blogger or Tumblr or any of these blogs, you can also see the metrics that they use. And again, they can use Google Analytics to figure out what's going on and what's happening and people's level of engagement and what they're doing and how they're dealing with it, okay? Then you've got Twitter and Twitter Analytics. And Twitter Analytics does exactly the same for Twitter as Google Analytics does for a website. And again, we can learn an awful lot. So we can see what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what kind of things we're dealing within the Twitter environment that we could improve on. And maybe we can figure out that certain things work with certain target markets or certain markets and certain things don't. And you can work out what's good and what's bad. So there's lots of stuff in there. And then Facebook. Again, Facebook has a thing called Page Insights, which looks at all of these things, which we'll we've looked at within Facebook already. So with this kind of thing, it's really useful. Again, it can tell you what you're doing well and what you're not doing so well. YouTube has its own little thing called YouTube Analytics. Again, exactly the same as Twitter Analytics and Google Analytics and all the rest. And then there's other things like SlideShare and quite a few of these other little packages and programs. And of course, even what we looked at earlier on with your app, and your app has analytics in there as well, and you can look at all of those. So to just finish off very briefly here, you would be a fool not to use all of these and to figure out what's good, what's bad, what's helping us, and what's not when it comes to metrics.